All right, excellent. Okay, so getting the most out of this workshop. As I said to you, it's really great that we have Jill here. I'm here to provide also the perspective from writing support, but we're in a company of lots of supervisors. I think there's 30 something registered. There's about 12 here so far. And I think it's going to be really great for you to learn from each other as well. So please feel free to get involved. I would ask you to de-identify any cases that you do talk to, but really get involved, and you can learn. Those who are new at supervision can really learn from the more experienced supervisors as well. We will have an opportunity for discussion at the end as well. All right, so this is how we've broken it up. I've broken it up into 5 parts. So the first part is just lots of information. We're going to be talking about the context, which is the milestones, support, and all of the policies and processes we have here at QUT. And this is where Jill will be supporting me a lot with all of her knowledge and vast amount of experiences. The next part is where I'll be talking to you about the skills that you can learn for those tough conversations. And I'll be breaking that up for, before, during, and after the tough conversation. Number 3 is where you have the opportunity to go into a breakout room and practice together, or get to meet some of your colleagues and talk to each other about experiences and tips that you may have. The next part is where I'll talk about feedback and writing, and that's, I guess, my forte. And so I'll talk to you about all the writing support that we have here at QUT. And lastly, we'll end with a question time. All right, so yes, this is Jill, and we also have Wendy Laver. She'll be popping in later. Wendy is the HR Service Delivery Coordinator, and she has lots of information too on some changes that have been made to our Candidature Manager system. So she'll be here later and happy to answer any questions as well. All right, so I thought I would sort of open it up to the chat a little and turn on your mic if you like. And just ask you, what brings you here? Why are you here today? So please feel free, turn on your mic if you like. Remember, we are recording. And again, to remind you to de-identify. Are you anticipating a tough conversation? Have you just experienced a tough conversation? Is there anything in particular that brought you to this wonderful workshop?
Natasha, I might as well kick it off because I am that person. But I think for a lot of us, I certainly feel that the kind of COVID situation has meant that some students are finding it awfully difficult to kind of meet traditional timeframes. And while we've been, I think, quite generous in giving extensions and really kind of working with our students to make sure they're having a not too hard time with all the additional pressures, we're now at that point, I think, where we have to kind of try and get students back on timelines. And I think that I certainly anticipate some difficult conversations with those that may have essentially gone to ground a little bit during that pandemic period. And so, yeah, I imagine a lot of other supervisors here have similar experience of students that may have had, particular difficulties during this present moment. So yeah, strategies we can use to try and encourage them to re-engage.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And I see Jill nodding there, and I think, like you say, it is a common feeling amongst supervisors at the moment, and also remembering to keep that understanding of pressures that might still be persisting regardless. And we will be talking to that as well. Well, thank you, Daniel. Is there anybody else who'd like to? Thanks, Jose.
Yeah, I have mainly 2 particular interest questions. One is some students appear to discover that research is not their calling, and they can do this like halfway through the degree. So that's one of my questions, what to do in that case. And the other one is, how do we know if, for example, the student is approaching more of a situation like depression, for example? So how do we, does a tough discussion makes it worse or not? So those two situations would be interesting if we can get some insight.
Okay, fantastic. Both really interesting points. And I will later talk about the importance of kindness. And I have talked to supervisors in the past who have had that same feeling that, you know, in fact, doing an HDR degree just doesn't suit a particular student. And actually, the kindest thing to do is to have that very difficult conversation about you know, not continuing. So sometimes it is difficult, but that actually is part of being kind. Well, I appreciate you both opening up to us. If there's nobody else and nobody has anything in the chat, we can move along.
If I may just,
yes.
So for me, the reason I'm here is because I've been managing really big teams in industry for years, but you know, obviously supervising and managing HDR students is a different kettle of fish. So in industry, you have usually an easier way of performance managing your team members, because there are set tasks, and you know, the work usually goes on a more predictable pace, whereas the HDR journey can go in bursts and slumps, if you will, and it makes it incredibly hard when you have someone not really performing up to standard to put them onto what you would call a performance plan. Because like weekly tasks or so are not necessarily conducive to performance manage a student in that context. So I'm really curious to see, you know, and to hear from others how they have dealt with that situation and what tools they've used.
Thank you. Yeah, excellent. Well, hopefully we'll be able to provide you with some really interesting and important information on all of the support, because we have so much support at QUT, and perhaps there's some of you out there who are actually not really aware of the support for supervisors and our way to support your students. Oh, thank you, Murray. Murray has just put it into the chat. Murray is a colleague here as well, that attending today will maintain your supervisory accreditation 2 years. Thank you so much. Okay, right, well, thank you, everyone. I guess we will get to it. And again, perhaps in this forum, as we are talking and giving you information about the milestones of support, our policies and processes, please feel free to interrupt, and maybe we will have a time for questions at the end. But if there is something that comes to you, I'm sure that Jill and I will be happy to talk to you as you think of it. There's not too many people here today. Okay, so I thought I would show this graph to you. This is something that the language support have put together here. So in my role, I have workshops and offerings for your students, but I also do one-to-one support for students. And this is what we've noticed, that students are usually referred to us, the writing support team. You know, more than half are sent to us just before the final seminar, or in fact after the final seminar. So I just want to remind you that students need to be sent, or issues need to be identified early in order to avoid those tough conversations. So it's really important that you, if they are needing writing support, refer them to us earlier. Okay, sorry, my slides just don't seem to be. Okay, all right, let's just move on. So the fact that a student might not be progressing, it really does become the elephant in the room. So this next section is going to equip you to confront that elephant head on. If a situation gets to a point where your student isn't progressing satisfactorily, you can have that conversation knowing that you're armed with the knowledge on how to support them and also all the processes involved. So I'm going to get Jill to sort of be my wingman for the next part. So We're going to talk about milestones, what they're each for, and the checks that you should make as a supervisor, perhaps any warning signs along the way. And then we'll also be talking to you about the new candidature manager system. I'm not sure if any of you are aware, we have a new system, and these slides will be made available to you later, and there's lots of clickable links for you to find all that information. Okay, so sometimes we see those milestones as the flash points where the difficult conversations are most likely to occur. So we'll unpack how things can unfold for you and your student and the support available. All right, so stage two. Stage two, or our research proposal for the MPhil. I just want to remind you that it's not a tick and flick exercise. I think at this stage, if there are red flags, this is where they really need to be addressed. So we kind of think of stage one as like a job interview, and stage two is like that probationary review. And just see if Jill would like to come in at this point to see if you could comment on anything that the supervisor needs to flag or check at stage two, the research proposal stage.
So for doctoral students, for stage two in particular, stage two is the second part of the admissions process. So it's an opportunity to follow up on what was in the research proposal, make sure that things are on track, that the students seem to be demonstrating the skills that they need to be able to continue to confirmation. So if you're seeing difficulties distilling some research, if you're seeing language and writing support issues, it's really good opportunity to address them at that point, so that if the students are successfully through stage two, and most students do get through stage two successfully, they can then be managed, those issues can be managed in the lead up to confirmation. We have in the past seen a lot of students get through stage two on the goodwill and good intentions of the supervisory team, thinking that the students might have some issues, but we'll be able to address those. And then it becomes a much bigger problem at confirmation of candidature, when things really aren't going very well and the students are a year into confirmation. I'd say, a year into candidature. I'd say stage two is particularly important for international students because they've often brought family with them, they've moved over here, they've relocated. So if things aren't going well, we really need to address it at that point, so that if it's not going to be a viable candidature, they're not a year or two into candidature before things really blow up, if that makes sense.
Great. Yeah, really great advice. So then we have confirmation, which is a critical milestone. And at this stage, the students are demonstrating their ability for scoping, resourcing, formalizing, and evidencing that independent data collection skills. So at this stage, do you think, Jill, that there's any particular checks that the supervisors or any warning signs here that supervisors should be looking for? Perhaps ORI or ethics could come into that as well.
Yeah, ethics becomes more pivotal at confirmation, but confirmation is really confirming that the project is viable, that it's well resourced, and the students are able to move on to the next stage of candidature. So they become a lot more independent, or the intention is, I know it doesn't always work out that way, but the intention is that students become more independent in their research after confirmation. They move into the data collection stage. They've had a lot of support through their first year to give them the skills they need to move into the more independent stage of their research. So if you're not seeing that, then that's probably a bit of a red flag that they need a bit more assistance. You can refer students to GRED team for writing support and other language and learning support. There are supports that we can provide at this stage, but it's really, are they demonstrating skill development? Are they ready to move into their next stage of research more independently? That's the most important things to be looking for at confirmation. My colleague, Diane O'Rourke, is in the room with me, so I'm just going to ask her opinion as well in case she's got some expertise. Diane deals with students who are under review and having some trouble, so I'll just check with her if there's anything we should add.
No, I was just thinking that it's as you're leading up to confirmation that you'd be assessing those things to see whether they need some additional support to help them to demonstrate that they have got those skills, rather than obviously wait until confirmation and then say that they haven't. So it's leading between stage 2 and confirmation. If you're finding that they haven't got those skills, that's when you try to address them by referring them to writing support or different areas of the university for assistance. And if they're not, you might want to consider putting them under review as they lead up to confirmation. So there's some indication for them that they may not be passing confirmation. Sort of having those conversations before the confirmation seminar, not waiting for them to fail confirmation.
Well before.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. That's awesome. And we'll be talking about the option of under review shortly. And I'd just like to point out now in the confirmation of candidature document, there is an actual question that you have to address about their writing level. And so again, it's just a reminder it's a new question. I'll be talking about it later on in this workshop, but there is a new question, and it really just makes you consider whether their writing is at the level it needs to be for this particular stage. So Jill, then we go on to the final seminar, which is, as I showed you in that graph earlier, so many students are sent to us at, just before final seminar, or in fact after the final seminar, which is such a shame for them as well, that the issues aren't dealt with earlier. Perhaps they've risen at that point, but is there any advice for supervisors around this point?
So final seminar is essentially a quality assurance process. It's to ensure that the student the thesis is sound, that the student is ready to go out for examination, to get some independent feedback around that, and to provide opportunity for the student to make corrections before it goes out to examination if they're required. So again, it's always based on good intentions and a willingness to support the student, but sometimes students who maybe struggle to get through confirmation, they're the ones that we then see are having issues at final seminar, Tash. They're the ones that get referred for support at that point, because the issues that we saw at confirmation, they weren't able to get on top of, and now we're at the final stages of candidature and they really need some support to get through. So again, it's just using that lens of, if students are struggling, making sure that we are flagging that early, that we're referring them for support early. If you're not sure what support services are available, you're very welcome to contact the GRC and we can give some advice on that. But it's just, in my opinion, and I appreciate I'm not an academic, but in my opinion, I think confirmation is the most important milestone. So if you're seeing issues, then we need to try and address them then, because if we get to final seminar stage, it's almost too late. So I mean, things can always be done, and we can provide extensions and we can provide support, but we don't want students to be late in candidature and still having difficulties.
Okay, excellent. So I guess the next part is to talk about the new candidature management system. So this is new. It came out in August this year. It was upgraded to provide a more enhanced HDR experience for students, yourselves, and for all stakeholders. There's lots of new features and some changes to existing processes. Jill, would you like to outline them, or would you like me to continue? It's up to you.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to that, Tasha. It was a long process. The upgrade to the new system was 7 years in the making, so we're very excited that it's now launched. All of our forms are new, the workflow is different. Almost all of our forms are now online through the system, which is a better experience for all stakeholders involved, but particularly for students. We've changed some milestone outcomes. So the milestone outcomes are now consistent from stage 3 all the way through to examination. So you get used to seeing that language, and we've tried to change the outcomes to be more meaningful and more clear about what you're actually selecting. So provisional approval doesn't exist anymore. It's been replaced with approved subject to major changes, and that's through all of the milestones. We've got some resubmission outcomes. We've got some resubmission with under review. So there's some options there. But again, there's some timeframes around which option you select so that the distinctions between each option are quite clear as well. So it's designed, hopefully, to make it a better experience for everyone, a much more transparent experience. Everyone who touches the form is captured within the form itself in the review history, so you can see what a student said or what a faculty nominee said. It's all there for you, and request for further information is now done through that system as well. It's not online, it's not offline through emails anymore. So again, it's more transparent. If you need further information from a student, you can just do that from within the form. So Wendy, I know Wendy will talk to this a little bit more later, but they're the key features.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. I'm not sure, Jill, if this is the time that we can address Daniel's comment at the start. Well, I think it was Daniel who asked about the talked about the timing, getting
students back on track. Yeah. We can certainly talk about that. At this point, Tasha, I mean, I appreciate the commentary. It has been harder with students who were impacted by COVID, and we've seen far-reaching impacts of that. Students weren't able to access equipment that they needed, or they weren't able to get groups together for interviews and stuff for data collection. So it really has had a long impact. Or students who have requested a long extension to confirmation a year or two ago, and now requesting a long extension to final seminar as a result of that. So we really are seeing candidatures impacted along the way. So in terms of how to get students back on track, I think that comes down to using the milestones effectively, to engaging with students. There's quite a lot of information on the website around timelines and things like that. So getting students to focus on breaking it down into manageable tasks and what they need to do. The GRC can also assist with that. We've got under review, which we'll touch on, structured candidate support, which we'll touch on, and also the GRC can help with outreach. So Daniel, you mentioned students who have gone to ground a little bit, so they may not be contactable, they might have disengaged from their studies. The GRC can help with some outreach with that too, trying to re-engage with students independently of a faculty, just to see if they've got any issues going on that they might need some help addressing. So there are a range of things that we can do there, but if you've got particular students that you're having issues with or you've got concerns about, please feel free to reach out and we can have a conversation around their particular circumstances and how we can best assist you with that.
Yeah, and I'd just like to comment here that Jill really does bring a wealth of expertise and knowledge to this position. I've actually been a witness to her wonderful work and all the support that she provides to the students. So yeah, I commend you for that, Jill, and I think there should be 10 of you. Don't know how you do it all.
Thank you. I really appreciate the feedback, Tasha.
So something else that's new in this system, and I just thought I would bring this to your attention, but perhaps Wendy will touch on this later as well. With the changes, there is a document, the student and supervisory team expectations online documents, the name. It's now mandatory for all commencing students. And I went and had a look at it, and it looks amazing. And I think it's such a wonderful it's just a wonderful tool for you to have to keep your student on track and hopefully to avoid any of those tough conversations.
If I could comment there, Tasha, I think it's a really useful document. When Diane and I deal with students, probably the 5 or 10% of students who are having issues, who are struggling a little bit, and it often comes down to a mismatch in expectations, the expectations that they have of their supervisors, which is often a lot more than supervisors really should be providing. So having this document from the outset just sets those clear boundaries right from the start so that students really understand exactly what the supervisor role is. Research degrees are all about an original and or significant contribution to knowledge. And as we've already touched on, it is about independent research. And sometimes students have an expectation that supervisors will almost write the document for them in some cases. So this document just helps to set clear boundaries around who does what their role is, things like how often you meet, what the outcomes of those meetings will be, who even takes notes of those meetings so that everybody's on the same page. That's all documented in there. So it's just to help manage those relationships throughout candidature. Candidature is long-term, it is one-on-one, so relationships can get tense during that time. So it's just another tool to help support supervisors as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And as I mentioned at the start, I deliver workshops for your students, and I remind them that they are the active agent. That's the buzz term, and they need to manage up. And we talk to them about all of those their important roles. And I even talk to them about the importance of maintaining the relationship with you. The care and maintenance of your supervisor is one of my slides. Okay, so we'll move on to the part where we describe support. So unfortunately, you're not in a position to offer your students a basket of puppies, but what you can offer them are all these structured solutions that provide a solid framework to work through difficulties. Just before we talk about each one of them, I thought it's also timely and useful to explain that there is a difference between the digital workplace and HiQ, in that staff and students with staff access can view the digital workplace, but if students don't have that staff access, they can only view the information on HiQ. Okay, so it's just, I think, important for you just to be reminded of that. Okay, so we'll start with extensions and leave. So Jill, I'm happy to talk for a little bit, but please feel free to interrupt me with anything. Okay, so applying for an extension, if you have encountered issues beyond your control, but you've still been able to progress your candidature. So you refer to applying for an extension and all of these clickable links here. Students may need to extend their project due to circumstances beyond their control, like natural disasters, failure of experiments, breakdown in industry relations, equipment breakdown, as Jill referred to earlier. And it could also include a request for extension of your scholarship funding, of student scholarship funding. Personal reasons may not normally be used here, Jill, is that correct? Okay. And it's an online application, and it's usually about 8 weeks before a milestone. Okay, leave. So leave of absence, or where appropriate, sick leave. If students haven't been able to progress their candidature for personal reasons, they can refer to the leave section. Again, a clickable link here. There's 20 days of recreation leave, 10 days sick leave, but domestic students can take it with the supervisor approval. And again, international students need to submit a form. Have I got that right there, Jill?
That in the new system, they all need to do a form now, Tasha. But yes,
right.
that's just a change. So yeah, that's a really great summary. Leave is normally for personal reasons, and extensions are normally for research related delays. I say normally because with research, there's always a little bit of a grey area. We've got sponsored students who might not be able to take leave and things like that. So if at any time you're not sure whether you should approve a leave or an extension request, please reach out to the GRC and we can give you some advice on that.
And just to clarify that, an approved extended leave of absence will stop the candidature clock and it adjusts all the milestones. Yeah, but also a reminder that while the students are on leave, they're not covered by QT insurance policies. Is that correct? And not able to access infrastructure like desks, labs, and supervisory teams, etc. International students have slightly different rules because of policies around visas. So it's really important to be aware of these when considering providing those leave requests, especially around the length of leave and the reasons for the leave. And there will be other supporting documents that are required. But again, these are all clickable links that will take you to all of the specific information. And Jill has offered her support if you have any cases that need to be discussed.
Yeah, just within the new system, the forms are a lot more instructional now. So there's a lot more information about types of leave, when supporting documents are required, what should be approved and what shouldn't. So hopefully that will be helpful, and same with the extensions. Extensions also move milestones, but they don't stop the clock, whereas leave stops the students from consuming load in their candidates. The students who are on leave are not expected to be doing any work on their research, which is why they don't have access to desks and things like that.
Okay, so again, if anyone's out there has a question, or if you're just nodding and you're aware of all of this, we won't take too much of your time. But if you are unaware and want to ask a question, please feel free to do that. So the next support that we have for students is called under review. I really want to stress to you today that this is a support mechanism. It's not a punitive measure. And what happens when students are placed under review is that they actually have dedicated support for a period of time. In the one-to-one writing support sessions, have lots of students who are under review, and it's really, there's a lot of stress and anxiety usually. And so I really explain to them that this is wonderful now because you have me and I'm here to support you, for that period of time. Okay, so I think you're dealing with the questions. Thank you. So the under review process is, it can provide students with some direction as well, especially if there's been a long leave of absence. And it allows the supervisor as well to demonstrate that the team has given the student an opportunity to improve. So the reasons we put, oh, hello, there's Wendy Laver. Thank you so much. Wendy's here today to support us.
Thank you, Chef.
Thank you. So some of the reasons to put student under review, I can say a couple, Jill, but feel free to jump in. So when they're addressing feedback from a final seminar panel and they're lodging for examination, for example, when they're finalizing their confirmation document and presenting their seminar. Often it's just when they need to complete work that is demonstrating their ability to successfully complete a milestone within specified timeframes. And I guess we can talk to the fact that this is ideal to get students back into following those milestones that we were talking about earlier. And remember, I showed you that graph at the beginning. It's really vital that if you do flag some issue with your students' writing, for example, send them to us well before final seminar. Margie, do you have a question? Oh, you're on mute, Margie.
Better?
Yes, thank you.
If you've got a student who goes into final seminar under review and you're not confident they're going to get through final seminar, what's the next? What support is there for that person? I know there's, you can give them 3 months to do their major revisions. What else is there to help them?
Would really depend on the reasons why they were struggling, Muggy, and what the reason was that you weren't confident they were going to final seminar. So, I'm sorry, that they weren't going to pass final seminar. So if it's about capacity and they just don't have you really don't believe they've got the capability to complete a PhD, then that's a conversation we probably need to have before final seminar. And that's something that we can help you with. It might be that they have to, that we could consider transferring them down to an MPhil and completing a master's instead. It depends on if they've got personal issues that are impacting their progress or if it's language and learning support. So it really is dependent on their particular circumstances. But again, if you've got a particular student that you're concerned about, I'm really happy to have a conversation offline with you about how we can help you with that.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, excellent. Is there anything else, Jill, that you'd like to add about the under review process?
Yeah, often we see students placed under review as an outcome of a milestone. It's probably, if you're having, like Margie's just like, she's having some concerns with a student who is already under review, but it's usually better if you're having some concerns to put them under review prior to the milestone, make successful completion of that milestone an outcome of the under review, so they're tied together. That way they get, the student gets really structured support in the lead up to the milestone, so we can really assess what is actually happening with this student, what their issues are, and how we can resolve it. But as Jose mentioned earlier, some students just, it isn't the right time for them, or they just don't have the capacity to undertake research at that point. So under review can help make those assessments as well. As Tasha's already mentioned, it is not a punitive process. It's a really structured process. It is meant to be a support mechanism. If the student doesn't engage with the under review, then the outcomes can possibly be punitive. But even with even if a student is show cause as a result of under review, quite a lot of students will be able to continue their candidature through the show cause process. It's often at that time that we find out that they've had some significant personal issues that impacted their progress that they just haven't disclosed to anyone. So it's just keeping in mind the purpose of the process. It is, I guess, in some ways similar to a performance management process, but it is intended to be supportive rather than punitive.
We've had some wonderful success stories for students being placed under review, and have really enjoyed the experience and been very grateful for the extra support. That brings us to structured candidature support. Would you like to outline the differences there, Jill?
Yeah. So whereas under review is quite a formal process and it has formal outcomes, the student either successfully completes the under review, we give a second period of under review, or they're asked to show cause. Structured candidature support is much lighter touch. It is intended for students who are late in candidature, so just before final seminar through to lodgement. So it's to support students who might need a long extension to final seminar because they've had research-related delays throughout their candidature, or they just need some additional support to get through final seminar and to lodgement of thesis. So it is very light touch. It's really about having some really detailed timelines. So it encourages conversations with your supervisor, between student and supervisor, around breaking down exactly what needs to be done and how and when the student's going to be able to achieve that in order to meet those milestones. At any point during a structured candidature support, if the student is really struggling, we can ask for additional supports or interventions if you identify they need a particular support mechanism. Either you or the student or someone within the faculty can request that. Or if you feel like more formal structure would be beneficial during the structured candidature, you can always request an under review instead of structured candidature support.
Okay, fantastic. Then I think Margie talked earlier about plans. We have the access, this is the access equity plan. Yes, so Jill, I think, can be a liaison person for staff and students at this point. I told you we need 10 of Jill. So provide support to students with short-term or long-term disability, injury or health conditions. And this is also an opportunity to allow approval of extensions or leaves without the need for those additional supporting documents, unless that's different in the new system.
No, it depends on the student's particular circumstances, Tasha, but if the student has an access equity plan in place, it does allow us to make reasonable adjustments to their candidature to support them. So that could be additional equipment, or it could be extensions to milestones without the need for supporting documentation. The disability and equity staff make an assessment of the student, and the student provides medical documentation to them that they may not want to then share with other people. So the disability and equity staff make that determination and say that they have this either short-term or long-term, temporary or ongoing condition that's impacting them. So the students then don't have to share that information any further. If we've got that as a flag on the system, then that's for us to know that it's been approved by disability and equity.
Fantastic. So much support for our students. The last area that we're going to talk about is, and you've been talking about it throughout, Jill, is showing cause. So this is the students' right to reply to explain their circumstances. Students get a letter and they have 20 days to respond. I think that that's still the same.
Yep.
So would you like to talk to that, either Jill or Wendy?
Yeah, so show cause is most commonly as an outcome of an under review where the student hasn't been able to engage with the under review effectively. But there are other reasons why we could show cause a student. So again, coming back to Daniel's comment earlier in the session about students who have disengaged or gone to ground, if they've deemed to, and this is just formal terminology, but if they're deemed to have effectively abandoned their studies, we could show cause them on that basis. Typically, we do an outreach before that, but we could show cause them on that basis. That just means that we're saying to the student that this is a formal university process. We're really concerned about their progress or concerned about their engagement, and they have the right of reply, as you said, to provide details on any things that have been impeding their progress and how they have a plan to get that back on track. So there's a few outcomes of a show cause. A student can possibly continue their candidature, and we do certainly have students who are able to continue their candidature after show cause period. Sometimes with conditions, they might need to meet with their supervisors more regularly, or they might have to do certain things as a result of a show cause, or their candidature might be terminated. And if it's at the termination stage, the students then have another 20 days to appeal, and their appeal then is heard by the appeals committee, the university appeals committee. So there's lots of opportunities for students who may be struggling to communicate that to the university, to have that considered as part of their candidature and for us to make adjustments. But sometimes it's as a result of this isn't the right fit for them, it's not the right project for them, it's not the right fit for their skill set, and so it will lead to termination because we've done everything we possibly can to assist the student before we get to that point. So, and I can say that with confidence that we don't go to show cause unless we've really explored every avenue and we're really confident that this is in the student's best interest, that they just can't continue this project for whatever reason, it's just not viable.
Okay, thank you. That's wonderful. I might just give anyone an opportunity quickly to ask a question or a comment as we finish up talking about the support. Happy to put it in the chat if you like. While we're waiting for anybody to write a comment, I also just want to remind you that there's so much support as well for you. These are all clickable links. You can go to this page and has all of this wonderful information for you as well when you're supervising your students, and support for students as well. Again, all of these are clickable links, but I guess it's a reminder that when I have a student in tears, I have to remind myself, I'd love to reach out and give them a hug, but I'm not a professional counsellor. And so I do need to refer students to QT counselling and all of these other avenues here. So please remember that there's support for you, there's support for your students, and please use this support as well. Brody is commenting in the chat, wants to say thanks for the information. Great to get more of the GRED perspective. Yeah, so absolutely. I think the under review, when I first heard the term myself, I wasn't really sure, years ago, but it's such a great support system for the students. And when the students meet with my colleague, Dr. Kerry Freeman, and I, they do feel supported. And, I actually say to them, I'm here now, I'm going to hold your hand until we get past this, this under review period. And they keep in contact, and they all, we've had so many success stories. In fact, we should actually document that sometime. Okay.
Tasha, before we move on to the next bit, could I just answer a question that Jose had asked at the beginning of the session? He was asking, just because we've been touching on under review and show cause and things like that, he asked about students continuing if or how we manage students when we know that this isn't the right thing for them. So one of the things that we can do, Jose, if the student's open to it, or as an outcome of an under review or as an outcome of a show cause process, is we can, depending on where they're at in candidature, offer them an exit award. It's not widely publicised, but it is something that we can do. So students, doctoral students in particular, if they've done stage 2 and they have a confirmation document, even if they haven't done the confirmation milestone, we can offer them a graduate certificate in research studies, which is an exit award. So it's something tangible they can take away from their experience. It's an award that they've got to recognise the work that they've put into their research so far. And students are often quite receptive to that if they know they're struggling themselves, or if it's come about from a formal process. They're usually receptive to that because it's something that that's tangible, that they can take away from the experience to reflect their time at QT.
Fantastic. I wasn't aware of that myself, so thank you, Jill. And I just take the opportunity to introduce Wendy Laver, who's arrived. So as I said earlier, Wendy is the HDR service delivery coordinator, and she has all of the knowledge about the candidature manager system, the new system. I think Jill did a great job there outlining that, but is there any comment that you have, Wendy, before we continue?
I think the only thing I would, I'm not quite sure what Jill covered, but I'm sure she did a fabulous job, is the information that we now have available for supervisors, because that was a real, one of the main outcomes of a lot of the school presentations that we did over the last couple of months. And we've got information on, so we've got a new page, a new candidature management page, and that has the link for supervisors to be able to just add the relevant tile to their launch pad, where they can click on the tile and it will take them into the system where they can access information about the students that they supervise. It would be great to get some feedback on that as well, because it was something that we weren't sure we were going to be able to deliver. We thought it was going to be in the second stage of all the improvements, but we've managed to get it included when we went live. So we're hoping that will be really helpful for supervisors to work out where their students are in candidature, what milestones are coming up. But yeah, that website has got all the information about all the changes with the new system. So I think if everyone just has a look at that website and has a read through, and then if they've got any questions, just to contact Jill or myself.
Yes, so I put some clickable links for those sites there. Can you see them, Wendy? And so the supervisors will get these slides later. And this is also a link to the new system as well. We also outlined that this is now mandatory document. Yeah, so it's wonderful that the system is up and running, and congratulations to.
We're very excited about it. We've waited a long time.
I saw Andrew, he's extremely thrilled as well. All right, well, thank you so much for your input, Jill, Wendy and Diane. So we're going to move on to the part 2 of the workshop now, which is developing those skills in order to actually have the conversation. All right, so I've divided it into before, during and after. And I just like to stress that when I talk to your students about presentations, I always say the planning part is the most important part. It's so important. Well, the planning part before a tough conversation is also very, very important. So let's go through some steps for the before part of your tough conversation. So this step one is understanding it's important to understand your feelings. And I think these are some questions that you can consider. What actually is the real issue here? Is there anything that's bothering you as the supervisor? I think you need to also understand what are your triggers and what are your emotions. And also perhaps you have some assumptions leading up to this tough conversation as well. We also need to consider what will happen if you have the conversation, and also what will happen if you don't have the conversation. So we'll go into those last 2 points in a little bit more detail. So if you can consider the costs of not having the tough conversation versus the benefits of having the conversation, I've just outlined a few of them. So some of the costs may be that it leads to resentment or an escalation of a problem. It also may mean diminished options. The relationship may become more challenged. And ultimately, there's stress on both you and the student, which could impact on your physical health. Versus the benefits, which could lead to enhanced trust, collaboration, understanding, an energized climate, and also new opportunities. So I think it's really important for you to think of all these things when you're planning your tough conversation. So this next slide, I've just put them all in. There are so many. I think I could actually unpack all of these in a 1 hour presentation unto itself. So these are the things that you need to consider when you're planning your tough conversation. So the first one is culture. This really cannot be overlooked. And I also want to tell you today that I actually facilitate a workshop on cross-cultural supervision. So it is a whole workshop unto itself. It's coming up on Monday, the 7th of November. And if you are interested, if you do have students from another culture, please come along. I'll just put in, I have a registration link here. So I'll just put that into the chat for you. So yes, considering culture, considering power imbalances and power differences, gender, the degree of independence, also where students are in their candidature, you know, at the beginning, in the middle, at the end. I think that's also a really important part of the considerations for you when you're planning your conversation. Also life circumstances and their mental health. There may be other considerations. I don't know if anyone would like to add any others. Obviously, I'll be having lots of iterations of this workshop if you think I've missed anything. But it's really important for you to sit and reflect. Okay, Margie, thank you.
I think the student's expectation of the supervisor is another one. They're from things I've been experiencing, there is this expectation that we are there to serve the student and to make up for any deficits that they may have, and there isn't this expectation that they own this project, and so trying to get that mind change can be quite difficult.
Yeah, I think that's a really good comment, Margie, and something we see a lot. So it's really good to put that up there.
Okay, so again, it's asking you to consider these things and reflect on them prior to your tough conversation. Please add to the chat as you like. I can refer back to it. The other thing to consider is the when, where, and who. So when do we have that tough conversation? Well, I guess the answer to that is as soon as possible. Yesterday or today, you know, it's as soon as possible. If there's likely to require follow-up, I guess I would suggest that you don't approach the student the last thing on a Friday. A Monday would be better. It may give you also that time to fill in forms, get all of your ducks in a row for the conversation, and whatever you decide in the conversation is still fresh. I would also suggest please avoid any additional or particularly stressful event in the student's life. But, you know, I guess by and large, the best time to have the conversation is as soon as possible. Where? So this is also really interesting. Now we live in the time of Zoom, and sometimes we can't avoid, you know, Zooming with our students, but I would suggest if you can, in person is better if you are able to wait to do that. I think I just want to remind you here that you should be aware of those power differentials. You want the students to feel comfortable, but you also want to have that space where you can have that honest and forthright conversation, because let's face it, it is a difficult conversation. I would ask you to consider privacy. Perhaps the student is likely to get upset to think about those things. So tough conversations should take place in a private environment in where there's no perceived power imbalance. So perhaps a neutral meeting room, your office, but I would suggest that they don't happen in a public forum, and especially in a group meeting. All right, and who should come? I guess, again, this depends on circumstances. If this is an early conversation, and if you're the principal supervisor, it might just be the two of you. But if this is a long-standing issue, you do not need to have these conversations alone. You can ask for support mechanisms. You can ask Jill. I know that Jill has been part of many tough conversations. You could get Jill or Diane or the head of school, your academic lead research, the DRT. So would you like to comment there, Jill?
Yeah, Tasha, I was going to say something similar, that they can reach out for support. If you feel like you need support or your student needs support through this conversation, there are loads of people that can help. All the people that you've just said, disability and equity staff can help as well. Also, if a student knows that you're going to have a conversation, they're concerned about it, they are allowed to bring a support person. A support person does play a specific role though, and I do have a one-page sheet on the role of a support person, if anyone would like me to share that as a resource, just so if you do need to invite a student to a meeting and you think it might be challenging for them, that they can bring a support person and this is what their role is. I'm happy to share that.
Yeah, perhaps if you send it to me, I can send it along with the follow-up email. Great. So those are the things in the before planning stage. So planning your conversation. What we often have is the blaming conversation versus the learning conversation. So in the blaming, I guess they call it the blame frame. Well, I just want to say that one of the things which can happen when you have those challenging conversations is they can degenerate into arguments about perceived facts of a situation. And there's unlikely to be an agreement about what the facts are. So instead, you can focus on trying not looking backwards, but looking forwards, and finding ways to improve things. During these challenging conversations, it's important to ensure that the conversation occurs in what could be described as this learning frame or this outcome frame. So if you see on the left, the blame frame, there's all these questions. What's wrong? Why am I having this problem? Whose fault is it? As opposed to the outcome frame, which is what do I want? How would I be able to get it? When and where do I want it? How will I know that I have it? What other resources do I have? And what am I going to begin doing now to get what I want? So just consider the type of conversation that you're going to have. Some other advice is create what questions rather than why questions. Sometimes why questions can feel like an attack, and they're more likely to result in defensive responses. So if you can, try to rephrase your why questions into what or how questions. I think that's some good advice as well. The next step or point to consider is positions versus interests. When you're planning your questions, I'd encourage you to consider the outcome of the meeting. So consider positions versus interests. So positions are really those surface statements of where a person or organization stands. And they don't really provide insight into those underlying motivations, values, or incentives. So interests are a person's underlying, interests instead are those underlying reasons, values, and motivations. So interests are why someone takes a certain position, and they encompass things such as needs, concerns, and hopes. Okay. All right, so that's some advice for the steps before, and then we're going to quickly look at during the tough conversation. So step one is really just to set the tone. Aim to adopt a calm and empathic manner. And number two, I'm going to give a personal anecdote here for number two. Anticipate that there may be issues you don't know about. I'd like to tell you about a student that I had who, she got quite upset in a one-to-one session with me. And she explained to me that she hadn't seen her child in a year. Her child was living overseas, and she was having some troubles with her supervisors at the time. And I felt terrible for her. Her child was 2, really, really young. And she explained to me that the supervisor didn't know that she had a child and that she hadn't seen her child in so long. And I think that it's just a reminder here today to let you know that there may be things going on that you actually don't know about, and really to during the conversation, or when you're planning, just really consider that. And it works both ways. There may be things that the students don't know about you as well, because we're all human in this, and I think it's just important to remember that. Perhaps you could start with some general discussion, and then tell them why you're meeting, and then you can begin to direct the conversation. Just a reminder, don't forget to use those what questions, avoid why questions if you can. And something I talk to students about in a workshop I deliver on feedback techniques, I found this information about the airtime that supervisors have with their students. And I want you to remember this. This is a common complaint, that the supervisors sit there, they don't say anything, they're not engaging. It could be cultural reasons as well, but also pay attention to your airtime. It really should be like this. It should be 50-50. This is in general feedback, but particularly in a tough conversation. And I guess that really segues to the next step, which is to listen, to really listen. Really listening not only helps you to better connect and understand what is being said, but it also provides valuable input on how you may frame your response and also navigate the conversation. By listening openly and attentively, it will help to cultivate trust, which is important as well. I really hope you take this one away with you today, how important stop talking and really just listen. Allow your students to talk. I mean, I think that it's obvious, but I think it's an important point to remember. Okay, step 5. I guess it's just important to remember that we can use our words and our body language effectively as well. Just to remind you to speak clearly, use I statements instead of you statements. Choose your words carefully, speak slowly. Also your nonverbal language, just consider all of those things, the eye contact, mirroring language, not showing that you're upset. I think these are the things that we can consider when we're in the middle of a tough conversation. If the student does become upset, I think we need to acknowledge it. And it's an opportunity for you to reinforce why the planning together is going to help. If you need to, please take a break. It's important that you check the student is okay. And as we said earlier, there's so much support available for the students, so connect them with that support. And that slide I have earlier with all of the support available, they're all clickable, and keep that handy for you.
Tasha, could I just add a comment there?
Please.
It's okay if the student's getting upset or things are escalating to end the meeting as well, and just say, I can see this conversation isn't going well, or I can see that this is distressing for you. We can stop and we can reschedule this meeting another time. I know in conversations that I've had with students, I've had to do the same thing. If a student says they're distressed or struggling, it's probably best just to end the meeting rather than trying to continue a conversation that's a challenge for both parties.
Great, good advice, thank you. The next step is to begin to make a plan, and I'd like to suggest that you use future-oriented language. I've got some examples here, and I've highlighted the future words. So using that future-oriented language will focus on a problem-solving dialogue rather than focusing on the past. And I'd also like to really recommend that the plan must have shared goals, okay? So something else to consider. All right, so when you're thinking of that plan, I've got a couple of models here to share with you. So one of the models is called the SMART model. You may be familiar with this model. It talks about creating a plan or a goal that's specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and also timely. So just consider these points when you're creating your plan. Another model that you could use is the GROW model. This is another really effective model. So this model considers the goal, the reality of how to achieve the goal, the options available, and also the will to continue to achieve that goal. So you can think of these things. And then it's closing the conversation. I just remind you, listen again, maybe check in with the student. How are you feeling? Don't forget it's a together. You're planning your SMART goals. It's really important that you clarify that the student understands as well. But saying, do you understand? Maybe that's that requires a yes or no response. So maybe, specifically asking the important parts or getting the students to tell you what they understand from the goal is better. Again, check that students okay, connect them with the support. And I would suggest lastly that you right there and then get your diaries out and create whatever meeting or event needs to happen there on the spot. Jill, would you like to add anything here?
Yeah, there's really great advice there, Tasha. We were just saying, if you're concerned that the student hasn't necessarily understood everything, it's possibly a good idea just to get them to do a brief verbal recap with you, so you can just check that everything's being discussed and you're on the same page. When we're talking about recaps, you've got here at the last point, reiterate the next steps and create diary invites. I would stress, if you're having a difficult conversation, you're having conversations a bit of a challenge, follow it up with a written recap of the key points. We met today, these are the key points of discussion, and this is the agreed next steps. If you do end up going to an under review or a show cause or potentially an appeal, all of those documents are really, really helpful for you and for the university when we are providing supporting documentation to the appeals committee. I put them all together. Usually when I do appeals, they end up being about 300 or 400 pages long. You wouldn't have to deal with that, I do, but we collate all the information along the way so that the appeals committee can see all the documents relating to under review, show cause, etc., what the decision points were and what the communications were. So it's just a good habit to get into, of sending a written recap afterwards.
Fantastic. I've just added that 0.6 right there. And I'd like to end with talking to you about kindness. Yesterday, I was lucky enough to attend an event, which is Conversations with Hugh Mackay. He's the author of a book, The Kindness Revolution. So I'm just giving a little plug for him there. It was a wonderful workshop, and he talked about how kindness can boost confidence. They can boost feelings of control and happiness and optimism. So I think it's really key to be kind, even when it's a tough conversation. So just a reminder to be kind. It's a win-win for you and your student. All right, so then we'll just finish up before we have a chance to connect and you go off into a breakout room. After a tough conversation, and I guess Jill has mentioned that as well. But here are some key points. So follow up with those agreed steps on the day, or as soon as you can, in a clear email asking for a response from your student or your team. And Jill just reminded us to document everything. Connect the student with support. You'll have all those wonderful links available to you. Please send them to Kerry and I with HCR writing support if writing is indeed their issue. If possible, get onto the admin straight away. And I think it's good to keep the momentum going. You have to keep the key people like Jill in the loop. So the key people might be the supervisory team, head of school, all of these people. So make sure you do that. And I think it's really important to be transparent. When Kerry and I'll just give you some insight. When Kerry and I do our one-to-one writing support with the students, particularly when they're under review, after our session, we send an email to the student outlining the issues that we can see in their writing, because we are not editors and we do not edit their writing. And I would encourage you to not edit their writing as well, but we outline what their writing issue is. And, we put it in dot form, and we always CC the principal team, principal supervisor, the whole supervisory team if we can, so that it's transparent. Everybody knows what the advice I'm giving the student, and so that it's just really clear. And then the supervisor often will email me and, thank me and ask me to provide, ABC support as well. So it's really important to have that transparency, and maybe consider CCing student into your emails.
Can I just make a comment on that, Tasha, if you don't mind? I agree with everything you've just said, but it's also okay to have emails that you don't CC the student into. If you're having concerns about the student or concerns about their progress, or there's confidential issues that you want to share, it's perfectly okay not to CC the student into those. If you, Diane, my colleague Diane would be the contact in the GRC for under reviews and things like that. Diane and I are usually involved in managing difficult cases. So if you, it's good to be transparent. I fully agree with that, but there are some things that you maybe wouldn't want to CC the student into. So it's good just to be mindful of that when you're considering what you send and to whom.
Absolutely. So I've just added that now and highlighted it. And again, find support for yourself. You having a difficult conversation is physically stressful. So you can do that with your team, with your colleagues, a host of people, and then debrief as well.
Yeah, and the GRC we're here to provide support for supervisors as well. Putting a student under review can be a difficult decision. Sometimes there's a relationship breakdown with students and supervisors. So we're really here to be as much of a support for supervisors as for students, because supervisors are really important in this process as well. And it sometimes feel like you can be overlooked. We're really here to help you as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And I guess that's one of the reasons for creating today's workshop. So I'd also just like to let you know that I do facilitate another workshop. It's coming up soon. Actually, it's on Monday, the 26th of September, and it's on feedback techniques. If you'd like to come along for that, I have a registration in the chat for you now. And I'd like to say, even if you're a seasoned supervisor, it's important to remember that what works for one student will not necessarily work for another. Students come with different sets of skills, learning preferences, personality types. So you really don't just have one supervisory style. You adapt your style to each student. And again, as I mentioned earlier, different stages of candidature require different types of supervision as well. At the start, we probably provide that close supervision where there's regular meetings, specific tasks, check-ins, and so on. But as they're developing, that you might provide them with more freedom and self-direction. But we'll be talking about all of that in this workshop. So if you are interested, come along. All right, so where are we for time? We have about 15 minutes. This is the chance for you to meet your colleagues, your peers, and really learn from each other as well. So we've got here 20 minutes, but I think I might make that shorter. I might just do 10 to 15 minutes. And again, I'd ask you to please de-identify any student here that you're going to refer to. Maybe you can just talk to each other about a tough conversation that you anticipate having, describe what you would say. You can do a swap over if you like, or you're welcome just to meet and talk to others. So I'll let the Zoom gods put you into the room, and it's now 11:15, so we might come back just before 11:30. There's not much more to go after this, but I think it's really a great opportunity while you're all here to be able to have this time to meet and connect. All right, so I'll just, if you could please accept the room, and we'll be back just before 11:30. If I have to change you, please be patient. All right, see you all soon. Okay, excellent. Everybody's slowly coming back in. And I think it's really wonderful that you're able to have these opportunities to meet and connect and, even mentor each other on ways that you've had any tough conversations, or, any tough conversations you're thinking of having. I thought this would be a great opportunity if there were any items that surfaced that you felt you were unsure of what you could do, or any support that you could get. This might be timely for anybody to put on their camera or have a little chat about the support that's available to you. So I'll give this as an opportunity now for anyone to ask any questions, especially to Jill, Diane, and Wendy.
Can I throw just one slightly curly one out there? What happens in a situation where, say, you're not necessarily a supervisor, but you're someone, a lab head, or another position, and a student confides in you around their relationship breaking down with another supervisor, as it could be a very difficult, kind of conversation to have, where essentially they're disclosing to you, a difficulty in a situation. What's the process there in terms of respecting both, your relationship then with your colleague, and respecting that student who's comfortable coming to you for advice, perhaps because, for whatever reason, they've identified you as that person they want to confide in. What's the best way to manage that as a process?
Jill?
That's a good question, Daniel, and it's probably something that we see a lot. It depends on the I'm sorry to keep saying this, but it really does depend on the circumstances, what's being confided, how comfortable you feel in answering the questions. What I would suggest is you encourage them to maybe reach out to counselling if they need counselling, or if they're having a problem with their supervisor, maybe to reach out to the GRC so they can have a conversation with someone who's independent of a faculty. Sometimes students are concerned about talking to people within the faculty because they feel like it could cause some friction. So I direct them to the GRC. Diane and I specifically, if you want to, there's team leaders within the client services team as well. There's lots of people within the GRC who can help, and we can then just have that initial conversation. Because we see student supervisor relationships break down a little bit, we've got some insights into how they can possibly get that back on track, or if they need to make something more formal, we can give them advice on that as well.
Thanks, both. Would anybody else like to ask a question, make a comment? All right, well, that's fine. Keep thinking of those questions and comments because we will have a little bit more time later. excuse me, I'll move on then to my section, which is about feedback and writing. As I mentioned, I'm the language and learning educator with the grad team, and you know, writing is an inevitable part of your students' journey. It's the principal channel students use to communicate their ideas, and in fact, it is the very foundation on which their degree is awarded. So I'm here today to tell you that there's so much we offer. There's so many workshops and writing circles that we offer. I'll talk to you about them briefly next. But there is lots of information and support for your student to help them with their writing. So a couple of tips to give you today in order to avoid any tough conversations on writing is, again, please find any problems early on in candidature. Getting an early alert. Sometimes we receive an early alert on a Friday afternoon for a student who's under review, their final seminar, and we just say, wow, the supervisor's had a hard week. If you can get them to us early in candidature, it's going to help the student and yourself. I'd also ask you to give feedback regularly, create that safe environment for the student to give them that feedback. I'd also stress that you give specific feedback. You know, in the workshop that I have for you, for supervisors on feedback, you know, if you just cross out a big section, or you just put a question mark, or you say okay or needs work, it's not specific enough, and it's really going to add to the stress of the student, and we need to really be specific. And I also encourage your students to ask for specific feedback as well. You know, building your students' confidence. Every so often, a little comment, this is great, well done, oh, this is a fantastic literature here, whatever you can, being kind, building their confidence. And I'd also encourage you to really understand what are the common writing issues that we see. And I also have a supervisor workshop on that. That has just finished, but there is a recording available on the supervisor Blackboard site for you. I also want to remind you, I know I said this earlier, but in the confirmation of candidate document now, there is this question: are the written skills of a sufficient standard to give confidence of a timely completion? You need to tick this. And if there isn't, this is the time. As Jill said, in the milestone of confirmation, it's extremely important that you identify any writing areas to improve. So make sure, and I'm really glad that this question has been added to this document. Margie, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, I'm just going to make the comment that there's a very fine line between the student's own work and what becomes then the supervisor's work, because there's been so much feedback provided that it is no longer representative of that student's work. And we've had a student who we sent for support for writing right at stage 2 and has been receiving that the whole way through. And I think whoever's helping this person has contributed to his thesis as well, because there's been so much input, but we're still not there. He hasn't been able to take that jump. And we have to get to the point where we say we've contributed everything we can without it becoming our thesis.
Yeah, and Margie, that's a really important point, but I think we're then moving into the territory of whether it's a capacity issue. Maybe it's not language and learning support they need or support with academic writing, it's that they don't have the skill set at the current time to be able to do the degree that they're doing. So that becomes a different level of conversation and a different support. Tasha and Kerry provide great language and learning support, and we were just talking before, it's not just about English language, it's about academic writing as well, and distinctions around that. But if they're getting that support and they're still struggling, then it becomes a capacity issue, which is a different conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Jill. Thanks both. I again would encourage you, Margie, to not write the document, to not, or to all supervisors. We, in our one-to-one sessions, what we do is identify areas that students need to improve. And I'll say to you, across faculties, regardless of the discipline, most students have, and actually it comes to my next slide, they have problems with these areas. They have problems with creating a paragraph. What's a paragraph? And as Jill mentioned, yes, it's academic writing, but it's academic writing as a researcher and for a thesis. And Jill talked to earlier, we're contributing to original knowledge, to adding to that, discourse community. So we talk to them about these things: cohesion, a sentence to sentence connection, coherence throughout the entire document. It's a massive document, and maintaining their research questions, their aims, all of those things throughout the document, and especially for thesis by publication as well, we cannot forget that. We talk about organization of the whole document, critical voice. This is number 5, and I think number 5, number 6, and number 7. This is what we really stress. We tell the students, you cannot just describe, as a researcher, when you're writing, you need to engage. Often examiners talk about how it's too descriptive, there's no critical voice here. So these are the things that we talk to in our workshops, in our writing circles, but also in our one-to-one capacity. And this is what we try to identify with the students. We also say to them, engage your reader. So often, before I meet with the student, they'll say to me, oh, Tasha, before you read this, I just need to tell you blah, 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 and they give me some context. And I say to the student, well, that context is what I need as a reader to read this. So you need to include that, things like that. Also, the value of your research. Students forget to promote their research and show the reader why it's important. So these are the writing issues that we find consistently throughout all of the students that we deal with. Grammar issues, punctuation, and editing and proofreading, these absolutely are not to, this is the student's responsibility, and they're the researchers. They need to seek out and find, they need to improve their grammar and understand punctuation and those skill sets of formatting and so forth. We once got an email from a student, could you please format my thesis, it's due tomorrow? No. And so, we put it back onto the student as well. And just for those of you who do not know what we do with GRED's writing support, we have this tiered approach. Tier 0 is all of our online self-help resources, and I really want to stress to you, these resources are amazing. If your student does struggle with grammar, and they may struggle with what tense to use in a particular chapter, we have a fantastic resource on use present simple tense, and this is how you do it, and this is what chapter, and we have all these examples. This is all available on the GRED HDR Student Blackboard site. Please send your students to that site. Tier 1 is where we record all of our events. Tier 2 is the biggest part of our program. We have, every week, we have at least 2 events, and they're in the form of workshops or writing circles. Writing circles, they differ in that they're a little bit more interactive. We provide lots of exemplars as well. So these are our 2 main writing support sessions. We also have peer feedback sessions where students can come. It's very structured. Students come along and they share their writing with their peers. And I'm the facilitator of the Writers Wellbeing Lounge. And this is a place where students write. It's a weekly event. They sit with me, they write. I have wonderful regular attendees from all over Australia. And it's also an opportunity for them to meet and maintain their wellbeing. Invite your students to come to these sessions, please. It's quite incredible, actually. If you'll allow me to just refer back to the early alert, and we were talking about when Kerry and I received these one-to-one support. When students come along to these workshops and writing circles, and we have workshops on writing your literature review, writing your introductory chapter, once they come and get all of that information, we often, they don't need the one-to-one support anymore. They come, they use our resources, and in fact, they must attend some of our events before they get the one-to-one in any case, because there are only 2 of us. But that is that tier 3, that one-to-one writing support. And it is for those students who are struggling and who are in need of that extra support. For me, just to sit there and say, okay, this is what I see, and this is how we can improve. So please send your students to us and encourage them to come to our events. As I said, this is the lounge and the peer feedback sessions are run by Kerry. All right, we have come to the end, but before we do, and before everybody runs away, I'm going to please ask you to fill out this survey on today's event. We appreciate you taking the time. It's very short. It will help us for future iterations of this workshop. But if you do have any questions, I'm so pleased to see that everyone is still here. We were meant to finish at 11:30. I thought it actually was a 2-hour workshop, so I've gone a little bit over, but people are still here. So any questions or comments at this time? We're happy to help. Oh, yes, and thank you for putting in your email. Attendance today will satisfy your accreditation requirements for 2 years. So we'll make sure that the process to put that in the system is a little bit long, but it will happen. And yes, thank you for putting in your email so that we can check your attendance.
Did anyone have anything that came up in the one-on-one breakout rooms that they wanted a bit more advice on or wanted to explore a bit more while we've got question time before we break up? It's a good opportunity to get input from other academics as well.
So it looks like we may have satisfied everyone, Jill. And as I said, these slides I'll send them out to you later. I'll include the attachment that Jill sent earlier. And thank you again. I really do hope you enjoyed as well meeting your peers in the breakout room. And I guess just let me end with a couple of takeaways. There is so much support for you. Lean on the GRC. Jill's incredible. Please reach out to her if you need to. Remember those steps before, during, and after. And we'll end with this, Jill's favorite comment, if in doubt, reach out. So thank you everyone for your attendance today.
I know some people were talking about particular de-identified but particular situations. So if you do have a thing that you're struggling with or a student that you want more advice on, please do contact Diane or myself. We're really happy to help you.
Excellent. Well, I'll end today's session then, and please wait for the slides and all the clickable links, and all the best with your supervisory practices, and I hope to see you at some other supervisor workshops. Great. Thanks, Margie. Thanks, everybody. Bye, Andrew.